Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back to the channel. This is called Take the Meat, Spit Out the Bones. That's what the channel is called. We have tons of meat that we're going to talk about, but there are going to be some bones in the message. So today we're going to talk about what is the best instruction or what is the best environment for children with moderate to severe disabilities. So, where should they be schooled? How should they be schooled? How should they be taught? So, what is the best instruction for moderate to severe disabilities? All right. So, what we're going to talk about today has a lot to do with the things that I deal with every single day. I'm in schools daily with kids with disabilities. I've supervised student teachers. I observed coach teachers, evaluated teachers, in-service and pre-service teachers who teach kids with moderate to severe disabilities. I've observed many different environments. Also, I was a teacher of children who had more moderate disabilities, who were on the alternative assessment. So a lot of people have come into contact with people with disabilities like this who have more moderate to severe, so they have more profound challenges or difficulties and inaccessible environments, inaccessible schooling and outcomes and experiences in life, which is very discriminatory, which is very ableist, right? So oftentimes these children who have moderate to severe disabilities are segregated in different school buildings. Oftentimes people may say they're not getting rigorous education, they're not getting academic education. Some people may say people are being babysat. There's lack of money, low expectations. They're dealing like teachers are only focused on functional life skills, social skills, teaching them how to do a very menial job, a low level, low skill job. They're preparing them for that. Some folks may say there's a lot of determinist beliefs about ability when you are in schools, segregated schools with children with more moderate to severe disabilities. So if you're in a bigger school district, you may have whole schools that have children with more moderate to severe disabilities. But if you're in a smaller school district, you may have a classroom that have kids who have moderate to severe disabilities. But just to recap a little history of the education for students with disabilities in this country, in the United States, it's been extremely poor. It's been marked by exclusion, not inclusion, right? Prior to the enactment of the landmark Education for All Children's Act, only 1 in 5 students with disabilities in the United States were educated in public schools. So that's only 20%. And that was like by 1970s. So states had laws on their books that explicitly excluded many students with disabilities from public schooling, right? So whether they were blind, deaf, emotionally disturbed. So this is a really good book, Disability Incarcerated, talks about how people with disabilities are being imprisoned, also put into mental institutions. I don't know if you ever heard of Willowbrook, but that's how a lot of kids with disabilities who may not have had cognitive impairments, may have had also physical disabilities, were housed in basically institutions. So you can look up that history. There's tons online about it. So other states permitted public school programs for certain groups of students with disabilities, but did not require it. In the early 1970s, over 1 million children with disabilities in the United States were completely excluded from public education, and another 3.5 million were not receiving appropriate services. So a lot of these children would be children oftentimes who had more moderate to severe disabilities, because kids who have more moderate to severe disabilities, they have the bleakest outcomes. So oftentimes too, they're the ones who are more segregated. They will not be included in the general education space, in general education environments. They'll be secluded from elementary school to high school. So there's some research that has been done there's some research that has been done by, I think, IES, a research institution, And they talk about basically the outcomes of the longitudinal outcomes of children with disabilities. So they surveyed around, I believe, 13,000 students, and they found various outcomes. This is also going to be linked in the description box. You can look at this yourself. So they have done different comparisons over time of these people. They also surveys like parents and some people who didn't have disabilities, but definitely it was tens of thousands, well, around 13,000 people who did have disabilities who were surveyed, who just graduated from high school. So some of the outcomes said that the graduation rate for students with disabilities is 60%. So that's on average. But if you look at your school district, it may be a lot lower. So I've been in some school districts where it was like a quarter who graduated, who had a disability. And remember, in America, there's really two main ways of getting, well, let's say three ways of getting a high school diploma. You can get a regular diploma where you have to like do Regents exams or your state required um, exam system, or, and usually it's exams, right? Take a test and pass a test to get a high school diploma. You have to get a certain amount of credits and pass certain tests, right? So that's a standard diploma. Then you have the IEP diploma. The IEP diploma is an individualized education program that some students with disabilities get. And, it doesn't really amount for much longitudinally. It's not really recognized in life or in in society. And that's a part of the alternative diploma that kids can get, the IEP diploma. But then also you can get a GED. Some people back in the days call it good enough degree, right? But if some people, instead of if they didn't get the standard diploma and they only have the IEP diploma, they could possibly take the GED. Don't quote me on that, but the GED is also recognized as a high school diploma. So, but the thing is that students with disabilities only graduate 60% of the time, whereas their peers without disabilities graduate around 80%, right? So dropout rates vary based on state and by disability category too. So if you have more moderate to severe, you may not be getting a standard diploma, and you may not have been educated enough to get the GED. You have to do that work on your own. So post-secondary education also is very bleak for students with disabilities. So they're less likely to enroll in college, right? And then also they're underemployed and unemployed, right? So there's a lower level than unemployment, is underemployment, right? So they're chronically not employed, and they may not feel, great about their outcomes. So around 57% of students with disabilities have unemployment 4 years out of high school. So, and also they're in prison more. 28% of high school youth had been arrested at some time, compared to 12% of youth in the general population. Only 60% of youth with disabilities ages 15 to 19 reported that they thought of themselves as able to handle challenges or feel useful and important. So oftentimes people argue about the appropriate education for kids with moderate to severe disabilities because they, in many ways, suffer the greatest consequences for having their disability, because society is very ableist and isn't welcoming of some of these students. So this is some old research, a little bit over a decade ago. I do have new research that I always talk about in this on this channel, but I think all research is very valid because these arguments are still very constant, very current in society. So some people were arguing. So these articles, 3 articles I'm just going to briefly go over, are in the description box. You can look them up yourself. So this article actually is from Aries, a series of different researchers. So basically, Aries et al., meaning tons of other people wrote with them. He was talking about, I can identify Saturn, but I can't brush my teeth. What happens when the curricular focus for students with severe disability shifts? So Aries et al., it was Aries, Lowry, Douglas, and Sievers. They published this in 2011. So basically, they were saying that education for students with more severe disabilities should be more functional, right? It should be having more functional curriculum where you're teaching them about life skills, you're teaching them about how to survive in society. So actually, a parent actually said, a parent of a child with a disability said in this article, my son can identify Saturn, but he can't request a snack or even wipe his bum bum, right? So the thing is that, what education is more relevant for students with disabilities, with more severe disabilities? So they argue, standard-based focus shouldn't be the focus. It should be more functional focus, but it also can be a combination, but they're definitely talking about functional life skills. So teaching children how to function in the world, function in their communities, get jobs, add, subtract, basic reading, writing skills, so consumer skills, community skills, functional skill summary. So they want kids to learn how to complete tasks. They want kids to learn how to do domestic and self-help skills, right? So they were arguing that this should be, a bit of the things that we cover, because yes, you can teach them all the academic stuff, but then can they do the regular life skills? But honestly, I don't know how you feel, but I think life skills should be taught to all kids, because we've gotten away from that. We have been definitely focused on a standard-based instruction, academic skills, but a lot of kids who don't have disabilities need life skills. So we had some people reply to that article, and and they said, no, kids need they actually need more standard-based curriculum. They need standard-based curriculum. They need academic skills. We don't need to just teach them about functional life skills. We need to teach them more things, right? The question still remains, what happens when the curricular focus for students with severe disability shifts? So actually, that is a response to this article. Sorry. So this article, the one that's displayed right here, 7 reasons to promote standards-based instruction for students with severe disabilities, a reply to Aries, Lowry, Douglas, and Sievers. So basically, they're saying, no, we should teach standard-based instruction because these students will be, voting, will be getting jobs, right? And these are some of their reasons. Students with severe disabilities have the right to a full educational opportunity. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason, a standard-based curriculum is relevant to students with severe disabilities, right? They need to learn certain things to be able to function in society, not just the functional life skills. Reason 3, we do not yet know the potential of students with severe disabilities. So that is a key reason. And I think, and please tell me in the description box, or rather the comments below, what do you think? Because a lot of times we have a cap or a ceiling to someone's ability. And a lot of times we underscore and undervalue and demean, or, all the different words about children with severe disabilities, people with disabilities regardless, but definitely children with severe disabilities. So other reasons, functional skills are not a prerequisite to academic learning, which is very, very clear. You don't necessarily need to know how to cook to be able to read, right? Or read very well, right? So standard-based curriculum is not a replacement for functional curriculum. So definitely some of these are great reasons. Individualized curriculum is limited when that is the only curriculum. And then the last reason, students are creating the changing expectations with their own achievements. So they went, of course, back and forth, very good article to argue why we should have a standard-based instruction. But then we had another reply, right? Because a lot of kids with disabilities have very bleak outcomes. And how should we educate them? How should we prepare them for the future? So this is actually the reply to the Cortez article. So Cortez wrote the article on 7 reasons to promote standards-based instruction. Cortez, Spooner, Browder, and Heimenez wrote that. But then Aries came back with a reply. The academics like to argue. in writing. Okay. Yeah. All right. So they wrote a reply. The question still remains, what happens when the curricular focus for students with severe disabilities shifts? So they replied to those 7 reasons why they should have standards-based instruction or curriculum. So they're basically debunking what Cortez et al. Said, and they said, no, we are arguing for an individualized curriculum for students, because really that's what special ed is about. It's supposed to be about specially designed instruction. You're supposed to be individualizing the instruction for students. You're supposed to be, 1, giving them access to the general ed curriculum, 2, teaching them based on their disability, or mitigating barriers they may face based on their disability. So their reply in this article, they're saying it should be individualized, right? It can be functional and standard based. So, but we need to have functional life skills. So honestly, I think there should be both, right? There should be both for students with disabilities, also for students without disabilities, because like I said before, we heavily rely on standard-based curriculum, but what other life skills are we learning, in schools? Are we learning how to invest our money? Are we learning how to become entrepreneurs? Are we learning how to buy property? Are we learning things that wealthy folks have, or various types of things that don't include the standard-based curriculum? Are we learning how to be artists, dancers, musicians, things that we don't really invest in, right? Are we learning how to write a resume? Are we learning how to get a job, right? These things we don't teach to often any child in public education. So what do you think should be the best instruction, best curriculum for students with moderate to severe disabilities? Please let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and hope to see you soon. All right, so please like, share, and subscribe. Bye.